All right, my name is Cedric Bol, and I'm a clinical laboratory scientist. I have been a clinical laboratory scientist for 11 years. I work for the County of Riverside under the Riverside University Health System Medical Center. I am the interim laboratory director currently. The jobs and duties of a lab director is basically the responsibility of the overall operation and administration of the laboratory, including the overseeing the competency and evaluations of the laboratory personnel that are performing test procedures, reporting and recording test results promptly, accurately, and proficiently, ensuring that the compliance of all laboratory staff meet with applicable regulations, including state and federal. I became lab director about 3 months ago, and before that, I was the point of care coordinator. Point of care coordinator is the person who coordinates with the nursing staff to do point of care or bedside patient testing, like glucose or electrolytes or hemoglobin, things that can be done at the patient bedside when, especially in a critical care unit or in an ER, when they really need to have a lab value right then and there, because it can make a difference within seconds rather than waiting for the traditional laboratory testing that takes about 45 minutes to an hour to get a result. A lot of times there are situations where providers cannot wait for that amount of time, and so they'll take the ability to get a result that can provide them in a few minutes or a few seconds even, and take that. Of course, a lot of this gets verified by our traditional laboratory methods to comply with all regulations and stuff, to make sure that the result and the treatment of the patient is backed by science and has been confirmed. Clinical laboratory science education, there's several avenues, there's a couple of avenues that I'm aware of. There's a traditional one where you just go straight into the field, and you can do a lot of schools offer the prerequisites to complete it, and then you have to apply for a school that actually offers the clinical laboratory science program, and you have to meet those prerequisites and requirements to get into it, and then finish you'll finish with a bachelor's in science and clinical laboratory science. The amount of time it usually takes is for a direct route is 4 years. And you finish with a bachelor's. A lot of times people get into this field as a stepping stone to get into medical school or dental school or any higher up education if they pursue, especially in the healthcare field. It is really beneficial to get into, if it's beneficial in my sense to see that if this is a good route to get into medical school, because a lot of the general science and prerequisites for medicine is covered in a 4-year bachelor's program for CLS. So meaning that in comparison, if a person is a music major or a history major, they have to complete those requirements to get their bachelor's in that field, but then also cover all the science and math-based studies as well to complete a pre-med requirement to get into med school. Whereas bachelor's of science in clinical laboratory science, it's a straight shot, because everything that you do to do BS and CLS is covered under a pre-med requirement, which is nice because being to finish with a bachelor's in CLS gives you the opportunity to have a job right after school. A lot of times a lot of people get into this field and try to get into medicine, and it just doesn't work out, and at least they have a fallback. It's a great catch. Say, well, if I'm not getting to medical school, at least I have a job and I can have a good career. So that's usually the pretty much the straight method of becoming a CLS. Another one is, like I said, there are a lot of people who get into other forms to get into medical school or dental school, and they finish a bachelor's, but they find out that medicine and dentistry is not really meant for them, so they start looking for other alternatives. A lot of them go into nursing because that's the next thing if they want to stay in the healthcare field. They go into nursing or maybe physical therapy or any other stuff. But a lot of people, it's rare, but a lot of people, it's rare that about looking into CLS unless they know somebody that's in the field, then they get in, then they actually start pursuing it. Problem with it is that there's not a lot of recruitment or advertisement for the profession. But when people realize what this is, they get into it, they like it. So there is that avenue where a person has their bachelor's. The only thing is that they finish all the requirements needed to get into CLS school. Sometimes they have to go back and do a couple of classes, like physics is a requirement, and a lot of majors don't, or a lot of bachelors really don't cover physics, a full year of physics, which is required. People who get into it usually have a bachelor's in biology, and then with that they usually have it already completed, and then they just have to apply for a CLS school, and that kind of extends from their 4 year. It goes into maybe another fifth or even sixth year, depending on the program that they apply to. Then after they graduate and get their bachelor's in CLS, or they complete a CLS program, then they're eligible to take the national board exam. And there is a few companies out there that work with the states and the national regulations to provide a board exam for CLS. The one I did was ASCP, which is the American Society for Clinical Pathology, which is one of the larger programs out there for certifying CLSs. And if you want to work in the state of California, ASCP is regarded as the number one choice. It's not the only choice, but it is regarded as the number one choice. ASCP is actually worldwide renowned for providing board exams for CLSs, and so it's usually the acceptable route to go through. But there are other methods of getting your board exam license. My background was I was doing the traditional route. I was going through the pre-med strategy of going through, but near the end of my CLS training, I decided not to pursue it anymore. It's just going into medicine. I lost interest in it, but I did like I like working in healthcare. I'd like to help people. It's a natural thing of myself to do that, and so that's why I stayed within the field. And it's a good career. My father has done it for most of his life, and he was able to live a good life with the career that he had, and I also enjoy it. So, a clinical laboratory scientist has to be proficient in several disciplines of medicine: um, hematology, urinalysis, biochemistry, microbiology, blood banking, immunology, and molecular studies. And we test almost every single thing that that comes out of a body or is inside a body. So most the most common sample that we test is blood. Next to that is urine, and then goes down from there. So we do CSF and other body fluids like peritoneal, pericardial, pleural fluid. We'll test stool samples as well, and everything. We've done. We'll test biopsies of skins and eyes, and you name it, we test it. Um, so the sky's the limit of what is coming out of what's in the human body, on outside the body, what comes out of it, what goes into it. We'll test it, and that's one of those things. But the nice thing about being a CLS, we're not forced to collect it. We have other people collecting it for us, and then we'll just take it, we'll put it under the hood, and we start doing the processing of testing that sample. I don't know, it's something that I've kind of already saw in myself ever since I was a little kid. Both my parents are healthcare professionals. My grandfather was a healthcare professional. Majority of my family are healthcare professionals. So it kind of runs in the blood, and it kind of runs with our personalities as well. That we like to take care of people. The story of Jesus healing on the Sabbath was something that resonated with me when I was a kid growing up, and it was something that I thought it was like, the care of human beings, to do what you can to treat others and love one another, is was really the one that really spoke to me as a kid, and as an adult today, it's one thing I value is human life, and I think everyone should be treated fairly and stuff, and so the that story of Jesus healing on Sabbath, and how the leaders at the religious leaders at the time really persecuted for him doing that, but at the same time it was like this person was struggling, and if you can help, you should help, and out of all the things that I can do, that's what I wanted to do in life, and so that's why I got into it. The laboratory I currently work in has windows. Depends on where. It depends on how they located and built the laboratory. The laboratory depends on the size of the hospital too. Will determine how many people you work with, but the traditionally CLSs are their personality like to work by themselves a lot and kind of be independent. Uh, they tend to be a little bit more introverted in a sense, because there a lot of them are a lot more shy, or they just kind of just want to, they're doesn't mean like they like to work with people. It's just a natural tendency that I've noticed in my career, that CLSs are generally just pretty much, they like to keep to themselves and just mind their work and go home and have normal lives. But yeah, a lot of times the CLSs just stay there in the laboratory, and the lab assistants usually deliver them the samples, and then they proceed with the work and report the results to the healthcare providers via the electronic management system of the hospital. So the nice thing about health, in healthcare profession, most positions have direct contact with patients. The clinical laboratory scientist in the lab, the phlebotomists have direct contact with patients, so they're the ones collecting the blood samples. But the clinical laboratory scientists have really 99% of the time, they have no interaction with patients directly. It's all indirect patient healthcare. They know the names, they know the diagnosis, they know what the patient's going through, and we're kind of like the stagehands in the background, in a play of everything going around. We're the stagehands. We're the ones who keep the production going. We're the guys all dressed in black that people don't see in the background. There, moving things around, making sure everything's set up for the people who are the face of the of healthcare to do their jobs brilliantly. And we support them. As such, and that's one thing. It's really sad though, is that we do a lot of this hard work. We're the ones who in the blood bank setting, we make sure that when you need a blood transfusion, that blood product that you're getting has been thoroughly tested by us, and that it is safe to be given to you, and that is, and then also that we catch variations and issues in your blood, and we were able to communicate that with the physician or the nurse and say, hey, this something's going wrong here, and you guys need to be aware of it, and so they can make those life-saving decisions right then and there, because we were able to detect something. One thing, in my career, I remember running a complete blood count, and I was doing microscopy on a blood sample, and I found I was looking at the patient's history. Really had nothing. It was a 25-year-old male, and came in with, I can see what he came in with was some kind of soreness or some infection in the mouth, and I ran the sample. And I saw the results, and the results looked really weird. And so I went into the microscope, visually looked into what's going on in the blood, and I noticed that the patient had some abnormal blood cells in there. And knowing my background, it was sad to see that it was an aggressive form of cancer, but I couldn't say that, but I went ahead and I communicated with the physician saying, hey, this person has this. And normally when I say, hey, you have this type of blood cell going around, it kind of gets they healthcare providers kind of knows, like, okay, so this might happen. And so of course, they started treating the patient, and then I did my work to confirm my suspicions, and sure enough it was. um, but it's those are kind of things that CLSs have to do. That's part of the job um, that you get into. You'll see all this stuff that the physician and nurse can't see, which is the internal workings of what's going on in the blood, or what's going on in the urine, what's going on in the cerebral spinal fluid. That's where we come in and say, hey, this is what's happening inside this patient. When I was in college, I worked at a restaurant as a host and greeter and as a busboy. Um, Having that skill set to work with people in the hospitality part of work and business, really, it's really interesting. I always encourage, or if I see someone who had some type of hospitality background, like a waiter or waitress, host, busboy, or something like that, I know that they can handle healthcare, because working in a restaurant is tough, because you have to deal with not only your customers, but you have to work with everybody as a team to get tables ready, and pretty much, make sure we had everything in line, as you know this that everything is in place to make sure that the experience for the guest that comes into the restaurant is optimal. And knowing how to prioritize your work, you know that is a big that's a big skill set, because in healthcare we triage all the time and prioritize, based on level of care that's need to be done for the patient. And it has a great parallel between hospitality and healthcare. And I really value my experience working in a restaurant at that time. I worked for a couple of years, and I still hearken that those skills and that experience to my work, because I'll tell you right now, um, a person going hungry versus a person dying is two completely different things. But if you have the backbone to be able to know how to prioritize things, it does play a big difference in how people view your work at the end. And I truly value it, because there were times where I had to do that and make those decisions and calls, and in the end, they were the right ones, because I know it, because the patient survived. And that was uh, that was my experience, and how I believe I benefited from working in a different field, and how that applied to my current profession. They have to be able to work as a team. They have to be able to learn to be independent and be efficient. Become kind of like a machine almost, but in a sense that you know how to prioritize and distinguish what is clinically relevant and needed, have that real critical analysis and thinking skill set. That is key in a clinical laboratory scientist profession. Critical thinking is big because not everything is cookie cutter in healthcare, especially in the CLS field, and that's where you have to start thinking outside the box for a lot of things. There's a lot of information and schooling that you go through, and the reason why you go through so much science and math is to develop and harden your critical thinking skill set and make determinations that will benefit the patient, especially in real real crisis moments. That's really um, what a CLS has to be. CLSs will work with a variety of instruments. The most fundamental instrument that a CLS works on is the microscope. You will be living and breathing a microscope. You will know the ins and outs of it because that is the one of the base fundamentals of clinical laboratory science. Now, outside of a microscope, there are a lot of other instruments that you will be exposed to. In school, you will learn the basic fundamentals of these different methodologies that we utilize, because the understanding of those methodologies will help you troubleshoot and explain or give you the confidence or the mathematical background to know that the results that you are producing through these instruments are accurate and precise. Now, these instruments can be very large, huge instrumentation. Okay, these are uh, industrial size type of equipment that can uh, um, run hundreds of samples through and have a huge throughput of results, because the turnaround time is the name of the game. The faster the result gets to the physician, the better outcome the patient can have, and that's usually the name of the game in laboratory medicine. There are several types of instruments. We have CBC analyzers, urinalysis, coagulation, blood bank, and the biggest one of them all is chemistry analyzers. Those are some big boys right there. They're pretty much the workhorse of the laboratory. So are immunoassay analyzers, and there are some new stuff that are coming out now that they've been out for a while, but they're getting a lot better. Are the microbiology type instruments like blood culture analyzers, and then there's a new one called MALDI-TOF, which right now traditionally to ID a microorganism takes a few hours, whereas with this new method called MALDI-TOF, it takes a few minutes, which is incredible because then it reduces length of stay for the patient. And the future of the lab is really based on molecular DNA, RNA type sequencing, where we can produce at a DNA level a result, which is incredible. And before, those kind of methods usually take hours, even days to do. Now we've been able to make rapid improvements. Instead of hours, a few hours, it takes an hour, maybe less than that, to produce a result. And these are genetic molecular type of testing, which is the new stuff. These are the future of the laboratory, which is really impressive. And from a science background, for me, I think it's amazing to see this. Yeah, CLS will be at the forefront of technology when it comes to healthcare. So you will be right there, and CLSs will be right there in the middle of it. And it's going to be an incredible future for the lab. The only traveling really is going to the hospital and going to the laboratory and working and then going back home. That's usually the extent of traveling for a CLS. It is recession proof. Anything that happens in the world, economically, even like this pandemic, if you have a healthcare professional job, uh, you're not going to lose it. You're going to be in it. No matter what happens in the world, people will always get sick, and they'll always need someone to take care of them. CLS's wages are on par with RNs, with registered nurses. So yeah, you can, if you're CLSs can have a very good life, just right there in the middle class. They make enough to provide for their own, or even with another, if they are married, they can really have a very nice life if their partner is also working, especially in the healthcare field. If they're both like that, like my parents were, we, for my family, I grew up with a very nice life, and was comfortable. We were comfortable. We never really had to struggle. So yeah, a CLS can have a very modest life. A lot of people think we are vampires because we're the ones who get all the blood from you. That was the first stigma that I ever ran into, and I had to correct those people. I was like, no, we are not vampires. The phlebotomists are, because they're the ones who do it, and not the clinical laboratory scientists. But another one is like that. When I mentioned that. My field, the first thing that comes to the head a long time, it was a while ago, but I haven't seen it recently, but I remember clearly is that, oh, you guys do that CSI work. I was like, oh, that's forensics. But there is a forensics part to clinical laboratory science that, yes, if when you're watching that TV show and you see a person in a lab running some tests, that's most likely a clinical laboratory scientist. But they did some specialized classes that go into forensics and do that kind of stuff. But my field as a clinical laboratory scientist really has not been advertised or popularized, in culture. There's really not much I can say. The only one I can think of that's close to it was the movie called Contagion, when the samples were sent to a laboratory there. That was a BSL-4 biosafety lab 4 type of laboratory that those samples got sent to, because the person, or not the patient, but the professional is all in this complete garb of their own, air supply and everything like that. We actually are allowed to work in those type of areas as well, because we're trained to do that. In fact, I manage one of my departments in the lab that I manage is the molecular lab, and we are at biosafety level 3. And the CLSs that work in there are in that type of garb, but it's not. They don't have a separate air supply, because level 3 doesn't deal with airborne infectious diseases. And that room is pretty much completely air negative pressure, but so is a biosafety level 4. But the thought that anything can be in there for level 4, we're talking like Ebola, that is like very very serious right there. And not those type of laboratories really are very rare. They most of the time they're either at the CDC, or they're done, or they run by the military. I like the camaraderie that I have. It depends on where you work. Depends on the lab you work, but the some labs have great camaraderie among the CLSs and the lab staff and the pathologists that you work with, and that's one thing why I enjoy working at the laboratory that I do, is the camaraderie there is great. We have a great teamwork mentality. We consider everybody in that lab as a family. And as a family, there's a lot of disagreements and things that people really have other opinions on, but in the end, we work together for the common good, which is to serve our patients. And we treat everyone with a massive amount of respect and love, and that's what I really like about working in a laboratory, because we're all in it together. Only laboratory professionals know what we go through. We always consider ourselves as the unsung heroes of healthcare. A lot of times, um, our healthcare brothers and sisters that work on the front end part, like to use the lab as the guinea pigs, as reasons why things aren't working out as best or as it can be. They like to blame the lab for a lot of things, but in the end, it's, after thorough investigation, the lab really didn't have much to do with the problems that associated, and that's one thing I really, um, as interim lab director, I've been kind of bringing to the forefront, making people realize, like, uh, you know, we need to work together. You can't just keep blaming the lab for everything. And it's kind of sad because it's like that across the country. I've worked in a lab over in Florida. It's the same deal over there as it is over here in California. That negative stigma, I believe, is pretty reminiscent all over the world for the laboratory. They like to, a lot of the other healthcare professions like to pick on us, but in the end, we always get our say. In the position I'm in, I oversee um, all the laboratory staff, excluding the pathologists. I have to evaluate performance and make sure that the lab staff are meeting policies and procedures that is regulated by our accrediting agencies and state licensures, including other uh, accrediting agencies that oversee the lab. And so it takes a lot of patience and really good interpersonal communication skills to be clear and concise. You can't be thinking around in circles before you get to the point. A lot of people, especially the higher ups in the administration, are looking for direct answers, and you need to be able to critically think on a moment's notice to give an answer that is correct, but also doesn't linger around. Um, you need to be able to provide enough data to support what you're looking for and what you're asking. So that is also a big thing, is to be able to receive amounts of data and criticism coming from your subordinates to know what's going on with the department, to be able to consume it and then provide it in such a clear, professional way to the leadership above me to say, hey, we need help in this, and this is what's going on, and present it in such a way that it makes sense. You have to have some kind of fiscal, budgetary type of knowledge as well, to know that hey, this is what's going on with the lab, and from because the administration is not only are they concerned about personnel issues, but they're really looking at fiscal fiscal sense, fiscal analysis, things like that. The director position needs to be able to balance an administrative skill set with the knowledge of being a clinical person as well, and bridge that gap. Because there's a lot of people that are in the administration that are not clinically sound, but they don't know much about laboratory. But you need to be able to bridge that gap and make it clear to them what goes on in the lab. But what does a CLS do? What does a phlebotomist do? What does a pathologist do? Working with different personality types comes with conflict, and so conflict resolution is a big thing as well. That becoming a director, I've noticed that I've had to be that person in the middle to come together, these individuals, and find a resolution that works for everyone, and that also does not interfere with the goal of the laboratory. and the mission of the laboratory, make sure it works within that scope. And that is one of those things that a lab director has to know, is that has to work within the goal and the mission and the scope that you provide and direct the laboratory to go. Make sure it complies with what the administration is looking for as well and what they expect. So there's a nice fine line where you gotta make sure you balance everything out before you break something. You have to be able to be that person, to have that knowledge base, to have that confidence that you do know what you're doing, and that you have that you're comfortable with the skill set and managing people, which is not easy to do. I would have to say that you'll need to have some great, you'll need to have a backbone and some great patience to manage, because a lot of people, like physicians, can be very demanding at times, and you need to have a cool head, because, as they say, cooler heads always prevail. And I had the luxury of having parents and relatives who worked in a healthcare profession, and watched them go through it, and their experiences have benefited me to, their experiences and mistakes have benefited me to be careful and mindful of those, to not repeat them, and a lot of it is just disagreements and things like that, but and miscommunication. So that's where I try to be as transparent as possible with everyone I work with. So if you're a general clinical laboratory scientist, you have a great work-life balance, because it's just a 5-day, 8-hour job. Um, you can choose to do overtime if you want. That's really your option. You're not forced to do it. But in a leadership capacity like I am right now, I am responsible for the overall operations of the laboratory. So I am always have to be available 24/7, basically, to make sure that things are done. But I am given, my time off. A lot of times I really don't have to do much, especially on the weekends. The lab runs itself. There are some things that, there are times where, I need to respond, or I need to be aware of situations. But these are things that usually the administration usually is really good at um, confronting me about it until the workday starts, which is on Monday. And so, but if there's a problem, I'll get a text message or a phone call, and I'll have to deal with it. But it's not something that really concerns me too much. But yeah, it's when you get into a position like mine, there's a lot of responsibility, and you have to own up for it. But you just have to make sure that you have your time and your space to relax, and whatever meditation or exercise that you do, you have to do it, because the stress can really build up, and can ruin your life and the health, both physically and mentally. And so you really have to be able to take that time for yourself and force it. You have to force yourself to take that time away. If that means turning off your phone, then you better do it. It's really nice if the schools that do have clinical laboratory science promote more the profession, because we people like me who are in leadership positions in the lab, we are more than welcome to open up the lab doors, and show you and even give you volunteer positions to work in the lab, to really see what clinical laboratory scientists do. The opportunities are there. It's just the recruitment of it is not as pushed as hard as nurses or other healthcare professions, and that's the saddest part of the whole thing. I wish it was equally balanced among us all, because I love and respect our nurses, and we need more of them as well. But we also need laboratory professionals, because there's not a lot of us out there. The average age of a lab is 50, 55 years old, and that is not sustainable. Coming down the next 5 to 10 years from now, it won't be sustainable. We need to have a real push for more laboratory professionals, and this COVID-19 pandemic really highlighted that. I'll tell you that much right now. The administration really started having a more of a bigger magnifying glass looking at the lab, because we struggled. The lab really struggled, and when the hospital struggled with COVID-19, when the lab struggled with COVID-19, the hospital did, because they couldn't proceed without laboratory testing, and without the staff and the means to do it. That's where a lot of hospitals and a lot of administrators across the country started saying, wait, we need to start looking at our laboratory procedures to make sure that they have the ability and means to do do these testing, so then we can provide better patient care. If you like to be a healthcare profession and help people out, but don't like to be in direct contact or don't want to deal with people, come and become a clinical laboratory scientist, because that's a great profession. You don't see anyone. You have the benefit and the joy of um caring for people in an indirect way. You do this in the background. You are the unsung hero. You are the person that helps save people's lives. But if you just want to be silent and just want to put your head down, do your work, be being working as a laboratory professional is a great career choice for those who like like healthcare and want to have a safe and meaningful job where you can live a nice life and provide for others and your family. Um, I encourage you to really consider looking into laboratory professions, especially clinical laboratory scientists. Um, the field is teeming with uh, availability, and when you're out there, you will most likely find a job almost immediately, because laboratory professionals are hard to come by, and if you are one, you will not be strapped for looking for a job. If you are a very detailed oriented person, love the granular look of everything, to make sure that you want to take the time to do things correctly, clinical laboratory science is a great profession for that type of personality who likes granular work, who likes the details, likes the small things.